We are among the top 10 most vulnerable islands, nation states in the world. These are my neighbors, my family, and friends. Without change, if we are lucky, we will become refugees. Without change, if we are unlucky, then we will be left to the mercy of future Hurricane Dorians. Today, we still have the chance to win the race against time and outrun the impact of climate change. Today, we can still do something.
Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Climate Conversations. I'm Arabina Apia and we are again coming to you live from the beautiful Baha Mar Resort Convention Center, where scores of regional heads of state have converged to plan the regional response to the global climate crisis ahead of the 2022 UN Climate Change Conference. Now, if you joined us yesterday, then you would have heard from Attorney General Ryan Pinder, who highlighted some of the efforts of government in holding larger countries responsible for their emissions, but also on some of the things that we as everyday Bahamians can and should be doing to mitigate the impact of climate change. Today, those conversations continue as working sessions get underway, and joining me now is Sandra Kemp, who is the Deputy Director of Comms in the Office of the Prime Minister. Sandra, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Good
morning.
Thank
you so much. Good morning. So can you give us a recap of what's been happening and what's been taking place at the conference, and why is it so important?
So yesterday was a very packed day. There are 4 main themes that are being tackled over the 2-day period. Yesterday we tackled mitigation as well as adaptation and loss of damage. Been very busy. First, the heads of government and the representatives, they participate in a panel discussion where they're addressed by experts in those areas. Then they break out into roundtable discussions. And then finally, there's also a lot of bilateral meetings happening as well. Even meetings during lunch. It was a very, very packed day. So that's what's happening. Now, why it's important, the government, of course, is very focused on addressing cost of living and crime, but climate change for the Bahamas, it's imperative that it's something that we address now. The Bahamas is extremely vulnerable to climate change. Definitely top 10 most vulnerable countries in the world, possibly the top 3, because I do think I saw top 3 somewhere. And that's because we are very flat and we are directly in the way of, we're in the path of hurricanes. So the intensity, the change in intensity of hurricanes as well as their frequency, it is directly related to climate change. So it is something that for the Bahamas and for the rest of the Caribbean, we need to have a strong unified voice internationally so that we can, one, work on climate change as a region, but then also demand climate action from international partners.
So can you give us an idea of what some of the takeaways from yesterday's sessions would be?
So this session is sponsored by the UNFCCC. So it follows UN rules, which means that the sessions themselves are closed. So I can't give you the takeaways yet, but today at 5 o'clock, the Prime Minister will be bringing closing remarks, which will be live streamed on OPM, and he'll also be presenting the chair's position. And so that's when we'll be able to get the takeaways of what it is that the region is going to be presenting at the UN to say this is what the Caribbean needs.
Okay, so it's now day 2, and conference participants will be focused on, and who are some of the big names? What are some of the big name people that we can talk about?
I can tell you again, because they're closed. I don't have access to actually who's doing the presentation. I can tell you that Mia Motley is here, which was very exciting for me because she internationally, her voice for climate, very, very strong. So she is here. I believe that she'll be participating in something that Bahamian public will be able to see later on. Let me not
Give me close to your chest.
Everybody,
close to your chest.
Tune in. But I can tell you today that because again, it's going to be another very heavy working day. The themes for today are, and I had this here, support. So climate financing. There are a lot of regional, international gaps in financing because again, it's very, very expensive.
It is.
In the Bahamas, over half of our debt is related to climate-related damage, hurricanes. So this means that when we're borrowing, we have to borrow not to progress the country, but actually just to rebuild. And so that holds us back, and it's the same thing for the rest of the Caribbean. So today they're going to be talking about support, and then they're also going to be talking about transparency and reporting, because the better our reporting is in the region, is the better our understanding of what our asks need to be, both regionally and internationally. And then we're also better to plan long-term strategies for climate mitigation and adaptation. So those
very, very important things. Well, thank you so much, Sandra.
My pleasure.
I hope you'll have a chance to stay close as we continue the broadcast. And also joining me today will be our roving correspondent, Marcos Ambrister, who is going to be interacting with conference guests and getting all of the details from the floor. Marcos, how are things looking on the outside?
Hi, good morning, Arabina. Things are already shaping up to be an excellent day 2 for the Caribbean Regional Heads of Government meeting on climate change. Already we've actually just seen the entrance of our Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis, as well as 2 heavy ministers within his cabinet. We've seen Minister Alfred Sayers, Minister of Public Works, as well as Minister Fred Mitchell, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we're looking forward to having conversation with them today. Already we've seen the entrance of the Honorable Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Barbados, and we're definitely looking forward to seeing all of the outcomes that are going to come from this meeting this morning. Also today we should see a lot of youth activists as they engage within their working groups and all of the different themes that they will be discussing. We have mitigation, we have adapting, we also have access to financing and restoration, which are the 4 main themes of this conference, and we're looking forward to see what our heads of government come out in preparation for COP-27. Of course, we've even spoken to people like Miss Bahamas Universe yesterday, Miss Angel Cartwright, who spoke about the work that she is currently doing in climate change. We spoke about her projects with coral reefs, and as well as her projects currently with helping to restore mangroves. And these are 2 major things, that some things that we may actually take for granted, but when it comes to climate change and assisting us in the Bahamas and within this region, those are 2 small steps that are going to go very, very far. Of course, yesterday we also even spoke about the effects of climate change within the Bahamas. We've been seeing the hurricanes that have increased from the 2000s going all the way into the 2010s. Just 2 years ago, we were hit by Hurricane Dorian, a Category 5 hurricane that stalled over Grand Bahama and Abaco and all of its keys and caused catastrophic damage to our islands. Of course, we know that took Abaco and Grand Bahama out for quite some time, which are our second and third largest economic hubs within the Bahamas. And of course, we know that has cost us over some billions of dollars actually in damage. We've even noticed that in the Caribbean, a lot of the money that's being spent in our budgets are actually 50% of it actually has been going towards climate change, the effects of climate change. We're having to rebuild. We're having to rebuild better. We're having to strategize and know exactly what it is that we have to do to ensure that we're not always facing these same effects from climate change. And so this meeting, this conference is definitely not one that's going to be a talk shop, but it's definitely going to be one that's going to bring about all types of change, and we're looking forward to what exactly is going to come out of this conference. Back to you, Arabina.
Well, thank you so much, Marcos. Thank you so much. Back here in studio, we're joined by South Beach Member of Parliament, Bacchus Rolle. Welcome to the broadcast.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
So we're aware that a part of your portfolio includes sustainable projects. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, definitely at the Ministry of Works. I am the Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Works. You know, we're involved with building of infrastructure. And of course, part of the adaptation with regards to climate change, we have to ensure that new roads, bridges, buildings, all are built with sustainability and resilience, all of which you need to help to tackle or to combat the effects of climate change.
So can you give us an idea of how climate change specifically impacts sustainable projects? Is it that you need to build buildings better? Do they need to be further apart? Are there special materials that are involved? Give us a clear idea of how climate change is impacting the sustainability of projects under your ministry.
Well, all of what you said is really true. When you build in this new climate change in mind, then you have to think about the what ifs.
Yeah.
Because it's fluid and it's changing, but of course we have to be building with the best of materials, and of course we see where that changes, and the information that comes in changes from time to time.
Right.
And so our architects, our quantity surveyors, it's a little deeper, but it brings out the best in ingenuity and creativity for the younger generation in my mind. And I think they will have to lead it as far as a sustainable building.
Okay. Can you tell us whether or not there are any considerations to perhaps change building codes? Hurricanes are definitely getting stronger. We've seen the impact of Dorian on both Abaco and Grand Bahama. So many people lost all of their worldly possessions, their structures. Yes. So are there plans or are there considerations toward changing the building code at all?
So September 1, 2, and 3, 2019. It's one of the darkest 3 days this country has ever faced.
Very much so.
And when you look at the report coming out of Hurricane Dorian, you would find that it tells us that a lot of the devastation is as a result of failure to follow the codes. And so, we need to change codes, yes. At the same time, we need to ensure that they're being followed.
And as a follow-up question, how do we do that? Because people are cutting corners, building is expensive.
Yes.
So how do we tackle that issue in a real way?
Well, the inspectorate, and that's a part of the Ministry of Works, and that's a part of our job. And we have to hold persons accountable, in my opinion, because the safety is one of the most, loss of life. You cannot replace that. And so we have to ensure that we are not only building safely, but we're building up to standard. And we have to ensure that we stay up to date with new forms of building, new forms of building. For example, there was some controversy over walls being poured as opposed to columns being poured, and where the strength of building lies. But that's new technology, and we have to stay on the edge. Maybe not the cutting edge, but right at the edge.
Right at the edge, I understand. Okay, understood. Thank you so much, Mr. Rolle, for being here. A major part of the climate change conversation, ladies and gentlemen, is NGOs and activists who continue to advocate on the part of the environment. So next up, we have the climate change advisor in the Office of the Prime Minister. Thank you so much, Mr. Rolle, for being with us. But first, let's take it to Marcos Ambrister out in the hallway. Marcos, what can you tell us?
Hi, Ravana. Things are, of course, shaping up perfectly thus far. We've seen that some of the working sessions have already begun. We've seen the entrance of a lot more of our ministers within the cabinet. We've also seen some of the activists that are already working and lobbying here. And, of course, one of the major things that I'm looking forward to seeing this morning and this afternoon, is exactly the inclusion of youth in the decision-making process. Of course, lots of times in situations like these, we have a lot of the heads of government meetings, and we see them creating decisions, making decisions. But one thing that's different this conference is that we're seeing young people involved in decision making, those people that are on the ground. We're seeing NGOs that have the first-hand information, of course, those that are currently doing all of the work. And so that's something that's definitely we're looking forward to seeing, so that we know that when we come out of this and we see results, it will actually be tangible results from people that actually know what they're doing, expertise in these areas. Another thing is we're seeing now with the region is coming together like never before. Of course, we know that there are some scores of CARICOM countries, but of course, one of us alone cannot be the champion, and one of us alone making noise for and lobbying for climate change is not sufficient. But when we come together and represent ourselves as a unified front, that's when we see change. And of course, we're able to engage all of our other allies like the United States and all of our other big house countries that are actually able to assist us in this. Of course, carbon credit and carbon emissions has been one of the big conversations yesterday, and so we're also looking to see how we can be repaid for all of the damage that's being caused to our country. Once again, Dorian, Irma, we've seen all of these different hurricanes that have come through and caused catastrophic damage to our country, brought us back in terms of financially. We've seen homes and buildings destroyed, families completely losing loved ones. And so this is definitely one of the things that has to be an outcome for climate change, as well as like Minister of State in the Ministry of Public Works would have said, Minister Bacchus Rolle, like you were speaking, we have excellent building codes. And so now it's all about reinforcement, ensuring that people are actually sticking to the building codes, ensuring that people are ready for hurricanes. Hurricane season began from June 1st. Of course, we would have also experienced a tropical depression, a tropical storm in May that was before the beginning of the hurricane season. And of course, this is something that we've been noticing for quite some years now, that hurricanes are even starting earlier. Hurricanes are starting from May 1st. And so now we're looking at some 7 months, actually, some 7 months now of consistent hurricanes. And so we have to always be ready. Of course, we know that we are expected, the hurricane forecast for this season was that it was going to be an extraordinary hurricane season. We're expecting to have quite a number of hurricanes this season, and so we're definitely waiting to see what this is going to be like, and hopefully we're spared. And so coming back to you once again, day 2 of the Climate Change Conference. Thank you so much, and back to you, Arabina.
Thank you so much, Marcos. Next up, we have Climate Change Advisor in the Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Charles Hampton. Great to have you with us.
Great to be here, Rabina.
So you're going to be sitting down with our social media correspondent, Javon, in a little while to field some questions that have come in. But I want to talk to you about your role. I know there have been some heavy hitters here. Can you give us some of the juicy takeaways from the conference so far, from the sessions that you've sat in?
Yeah, no, this has definitely been an amazing conference so far, and I think that the fact that the response that we're getting back from the heads of government and the ministers that are here is that this has been an outstanding event. I think that we should be really proud that we have a country like Cuba who is here. Cuba doesn't often have an opportunity to be able to advocate on the global stage for a variety of reasons, but we thought that it was important that if we're going to have a Caribbean conference, that we invite the Caribbean, and that includes our colleagues, our brothers and sisters in Cuba. In addition, of course, there was a lot of fanfare with Prime Minister Mia Mottley showing up here as well, and of course has this energy and exuberance and vibrance about her, and the continued amazing ideas of how we can advance on issues of climate justice and being to really be able to rethink how this climate finance space is going to look like. And I know that there's been a lot of bilaterals that have been sought with the Bahamas, with multilateral entities, banks, other countries, but I was really thinking about how are we going to advance these issues. I think that we had very strong views on how do we help to mobilize climate finance. There have been so much promises given to us as a region on this issue of $100 billion per year, and it not coming fast enough. And so for us, we're trying to find, and we discussed, without getting into the strategy, what are some areas that we will focus on to see how we can actually get some money moving quickly in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term.
Okay. Now, I know that you're on the Article 6.4 the supervisory body related to carbon credits. Can you tell us about the importance of that, specifically to the Bahamas? What is the significance for us?
Yes. Well, for a long time, this issue of carbon credits, or the price of removing carbon from an air, has been something really dominated by those in the global north, in the developed countries. And so a lot of the interactions have been under the Kyoto Protocol, which persons might have learned about it in school to try and reduce greenhouse gases. That wasn't really working, and there were a lot of things in terms of environmental integrity, in terms of how the counting of the carbon credits were done, ensuring that there was actually equity in the way that funds were being utilized in reducing carbon credits. So under the Paris Agreement, a new body was set up, the Article 6.4 supervisory body, which is a new UN carbon credit system, which replaces the Kyoto Protocol and puts in stronger measures to ensure environmental integrity, sustainability, and social safeguards are in place, and ensures that players from across the world in the global south, like us in the Bahamas and the global north, those in the EU, US, etc., can all play on a level playing field. Now, there are only 12 members and 12 alternate members who sit on this committee, and they represent different regions of the world. And so the Bahamas sits on this committee, myself as the member from the group of Latin America and Caribbean countries.
Understood.
And essentially what I'm doing is bringing an expertise in this particular subject, ensuring that that the views of us as a group of countries are being felt, that the rules are set up in a way that is equitable, to ensure that rules about how funding is levied and all of that is done. And what I think is a good thing for the Bahamas is that being able to have someone in that position and being able to understand how the rules are being made will only help us to be even more aligned with what we're doing here in country around the issue of carbon credits.
Awesome.
So yeah, and I also think it's, it also shows that in a short period of time, the Bahamas has become a heavy hitter in the international space. And so I'm looking forward. I'm humbled to be in the position, and we'll work as best as we can over the next 4 years while I'm on that committee to get work done.
Well, we're very thankful to have you in that role. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We're headed out to our roving correspondent, Marcos Ambristo. Marcos, can you tell us what's going on out in the hallways?
Well, speaking, Robin, of heavy hitters within climate change within our region, we've actually just seen Prime Minister Brave Davis as well as Prime Minister of the Republic of Barbados, Prime Minister Mia Mottley. They were actually just walked together to go into another session. And of course, we're excited to see what those two big movers and changers within the climate change arena, within the CARICOM space, are getting ready to actually produce for us. But speaking of big movers and changers, we actually have our very own Mr. Sandy Sands that will be joining me now. Mr. Sands, we know that you are a man that wears many, many hats, from hoteling, from being a major hotelier to now the New Providence Ecology Park. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that's being done?
Well, at the New Providence Ecology Park, we are working towards transforming that space to a more economically, environmentally, and sustainable institution. Over the last 3-4 years, we've done tremendous work, and also educating the Bahamian public about the need for sustainable waste management systems. And we're very happy for the progress we've made today.
Can you tell me a little bit about where this was birthed from? Exactly where did it come about? Of course, we've been hearing about climate change for quite some time, but I think now people are actually now becoming more accustomed to exactly what this means for our country. Can you break it down for us?
Well, being a hotelier and being part of an archipelagic group of islands, climate change has always been a very important element for us as citizens, simply because we have been the victims of multiple hurricanes, some of them very disastrous. Of course, our recent history with Dorian is an excellent example of, if we do not manage this phenomena, we will be in tremendous trouble going forward. And that's going to put tremendous pressure on future hotel developers and leisure developers in terms of how they build, where they build, how far back from the ocean, et cetera, and that is going to be extremely important. So a conference like that's taking place here today will equip countries like the Bahamas with perhaps concession loans that will help the government to mitigate against some of these phenomena, and also provide source money for a number of institutions to manage processes to counteract this whole issue of negative climate change.
And can you tell me a little bit about what conversations have been like with the stakeholders? You mentioned hoteliers, you spoke about the government, and of course the NPEP that you also represent. Tell me about what stakeholders' involvement is like inside this process.
Well, to be very honest, this particular session is an opportunity for member states and leaders of member Caribbean islands to caucus and to present their ideas for when they meet in plenary session in Egypt towards the end of this year, to formulate asks that will benefit this particular region. And we are extremely hopeful that they have a unified position in terms of the ask for the Caribbean region to larger states to support our various countries in mitigating and working towards minimizing the negative impacts of climate change on our island economies.
Now, of course, this is a high-level meeting where we're seeing the stakeholders, we're seeing the CARICOM heads of government. But can you tell us a little bit about what the average Bahamian can be doing in their everyday life to mitigate the effects of climate change?
I think the most important thing is to become engaged, educate yourself about the phenomena of climate change, understands that the responsibility and the impact of climate change impacts all of us, whether we like it or not. The impact it will have on our oceans and the impact it will have on our marine life and the food that sustains us going forward, how we will be able to survive. We are a tourism industry. Right now we know that hurricane season represents 3, 4, 5 months out of the year. We cannot continue to withstand catastrophic hurricanes and the impacts of climate change on our island economy. So education is number one. Become engaged is number two. And play your part, however small, in mitigating this process going forward.
You're absolutely correct. Just before we end, I know you spoke about us being an archipelagic nation. Can you speak about exactly what that means for us? You know, other countries are just one island countries where they're able to protect the entire country when a storm comes. But speak about some of the facts and the things that we have to do that are different from other countries.
Number one, economics. We have to replicate over and over and over again expenditures for our multiple islands. Many of the islands that are visiting here may be single island destinations or twin island destinations. If we look at inhabited islands of the Bahamas, we're talking at least 30. And that economic impact on an already pressed government in terms of financing to deal with other issues poses significant issues on the purse strings of a country. That is why a meeting in caucus like this and getting developed nations to support countries like the Bahamas with concession loans so that they can offset some of these costs are extremely important.
That's definitely so. And so, Rabina, you've heard it first here from Mr. Sandy Sands from the New Providence Ecology Park, and we're definitely looking forward to all that this meeting will have to offer as we get ready for Egypt and COP-27. Back to you, Rabina.
Thank you so much, Marcos. Definitely some amazing work being done by the NPEP. So let's head over to our social media correspondent, Javon, who has Charles Hamilton with him for some social media questions. Javon?
Thanks, Robina. It's day 2 and our OPM social media page is still buzzing with questions for our special guests. And like you said, we have Charles Hamilton. How are you doing today, Charles?
I'm doing fantastic.
Great. So we have some social media questions for you, so let's get right into it. All right. We have a question from Yolanda Says. She says, it's nice to see the region working together on climate change. Will our impact be stronger because we combined our efforts?
Yes, most definitely. I think that this region, we punch far above our weight, and we've been the region that has caused a lot of issues to actually move forward. Even outside of the climate change space, we've been a region that caused for a universal declaration on HIV and AIDS to be done, which helped to facilitate HIV medication being done.
Wow.
We've been a region that has encouraged the recognition of non-communicable diseases to address as an issue. And we're a region that has been the catalyst for having a human rights rapporteur for climate change to be appointed. We've been the region that has also encouraged for a high-level champion on our climate change to be appointed. So I think us getting together in a room, even though we have our differences, we have things that unite us, and us being able to be on the same script, on the same page, and going out into the international community shows us that we are not, we're no longer going to be sitting on the sidelines.
Yes.
We have very few years left to act.
Yes.
This is supposed to be a decade for action and reducing greenhouse gas emissions or carbon dioxide pollution by the year 2030. And we're not seeing the actions happening fast enough. We're glad to see what happened in the U.S. recently with their big bill, and also in Australia as well. But more needs to be done by our partners around the world. And for us to get the type of critical mass, we need to be united as a region.
Fantastic. Together we can.
Together we can, absolutely.
Okay, we have another question here from Francis Moss, who's from Abaco. And the question reads, does the government have any plans to walk the walk by using cleaner solar power energy at its government facilities or electric cars as government vehicles, as an example?
Yes, I am aware that the government has embarked on actually trying to expand its government fleet to be to increase the mix to having more renewable energy powered vehicles.
Fantastic.
And that's something that I know has been mobilized. Additionally, in terms of the components of ensuring that more of our public buildings and whatnot are being powered by renewable energy. This is something that we also are working on and advancing. I know that there are several projects that are in place that are looking at retrofitting of facilities to ensure that they can be more green and smart, and so therefore reducing its carbon footprint. Additionally, I know that the government is also looking at embarking with partners with expanding the amount of renewable energy provision here in New Providence, but also across other islands in the Bahamas. And so I don't want to preempt what the Prime Minister is going to say, and I know, right, that he has a few things that he's going to be remarking on. But yes, we are very much trying to walk the talk. What has been us trying to do is, one, finding the partners, and two, finding the funding. And I think that's why the meetings like this are important, because we both have the partners and the funders who are in the room. And therefore we can say, hey, we're trying to put ourselves as an example. What are you going to do to help us to also be able to drive forward this agenda of becoming more green and sustainable?
It's great news, great news. Calvin Poitier asks the following question and makes a statement. The Prime Minister said we are in danger of becoming climate refugees due to rising oceans. If we do nothing about climate change, can this scary statement actually come true?
Yes, it's one of those sobering messages that has been echoed, that if we do nothing, that we will become climate refugees. And the science has shown even, grimmer projections about the rate and speed at which sea level rise and climate change is occurring. And that's why I think this is the reason how come Caribbean heads are here together, because we've been saying this for over 30 years.
Wow.
Right? But for those who've been watching the news, you would see that Europe's on fire. Their infrastructure is melting because of heat. You're seeing the unprecedented flooding happening in South Korea. You're seeing these forest fires that have been devastating parts of the U.S. And I think that they're getting, just like what the PM was saying, our yesterday will be your today. Right? And people are seeing it a lot faster. And so it's been island nations like the Bahamas and the Caribbean states that have been pushing for temperature increases to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we're going to continue that fight. We are trying to refocus what are things that need to be done so that adaptation to climate change can be advanced, and so that people like us in our region don't become climate refugees. But we're also the partners in the room. We're like, you do nothing, we're going to be at your door. So it's in your best interest, it's in our best interest to ensure that this issue gets resolved.
Okay. And we have one final question for you, and that's from Sherrod Pierre. He says, I think we should start teaching our kids from primary school about this topic. Present and future generations need to know everything about climate change. What do you feel about that statement?
Oh man, I definitely think that is so important. One of the things that that the people of the Bahamas need to know, with the government's focus on climate change, we were saying that we need to find opportunities to try and really increase public education and outreach around climate change. So one of the first things that has been done is within the UN framework, there's something called an ACE focal point, Action for Climate Empowerment and Education. That's been appointed by the Bahamas. Yeah. We've been asked to appoint one of those for a while. And I also think it's so important that we also, find ways to synergize work that's being done in country, like with the Bahamas National Trust, yes. like with BRIEF, like with all of these institutions that really have been, doing a lot of good work in educating. But how do we then manage to scale up this work, right? There's some good work being done by young marine explorers in this climate change capacity building initiative to teach young people around these different topics around climate change. And so we can't do it by ourselves. We know that partners will be required. We're trying to see how we can find ways to better synergize, yes. Working with partners, working within the education system, yes. looking at ensuring that the curriculum can be updated yes. and be taught in a way that young people can grasp it. They don't get frightened from it. They can channel that energy into something for action. So I know that there's a lot more I can say, but I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. It's clear that education is key. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Charles, for a great discussion. Back to you, Rabina.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. There's some interesting information indeed. Joining me now in studio is the outgoing Executive Director of the Bahamas National Trust, Mr. Eric Carey. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. Great
That's
to be here.
Good.
Thanks for
Thank you
having me.
so much for being here. You have a stellar career in preservation, preservation, mm-hmm. advocacy, especially when it comes to environmental issues. Can you give us an idea of, what the trust has been doing in terms of the protection of our waters, and now how that relates and comes full focus into this climate change discussion?
I mean, absolutely. So first, thank you for having us. I think it's important, as Charles, Mr. Hamilton was just speaking about. I mean, people like Charles and Rochelle and others, the Prime Minister takes the message very effectively internationally. But as he pointed out, and the question from social media, how does it impact the average Bahamian? Yeah. And that's what organizations like the Bahamas National Trust, BRIEF, etc., YME, we've been doing for years. So our work is focused on protecting the basic units of biodiversity, the Bahamas National Trust. Everything that we do is underpinned by protected areas, national parks. Absolutely. The degree to which we protect the environment builds the resiliency that we talk about when we talk about climate change and how mm-hmm. it's going to impact our country. The more intact systems you have, the better they are to withstand storms. The more intact systems you have, like the millions of acres within the national park system, mm-hmm. that becomes important as you think about your NDCs, when you think about carbon credits and then what you have to trade Absolutely. With respect to beyond that. So the work of the organizations like the BNT is really important. Mm-hmm. I've been here for 20 years, and as you noted, I am outgoing, mm-hmm. not retiring, as people. I'm too young and too poor to retire.
No, you're too young. We need you in the fight.
But no, and I will stay very much involved in the field. I had some really good discussions last night with the Prime Minister and other colleagues from the NGO fraternity. Mm-hmm. It's going to be much more important. Our work is going to continue. And, the questions asked about, how do you need to educate Bahamians about what this means for us going forward into the future? Climate change is going to be a part of our future mm-hmm. in perpetuity. Our country is going to be changed by it. We hope that we stay above water, which means we have to keep fighting at the international level, but we also need to be implementing conservation measures mm-hmm. at the local level. And I think that's the power and the work of the importance and the power of the work of organizations mm-hmm. like the Bahamas National Trust.
So you talked about the importance of NGOs in this sort of education process. Can you give us an idea of some people may not know, what are some of the things that the Trust is doing to really help educate persons at all levels, from children to adults?
Oh yeah, I mean, we've been doing environmental education for years, mm-hmm. even before I got to the BNT. Our Discovery Club is an award-winning mm-hmm. program that basically takes kids from high school level, and we actually have partners even working at universities. So primary, high school, even up to university level. And our programs are designed to basically build environmental stewards. Our country is vast. We will never have the enforcement capacity to enforce all of the rules, all of the anti-litter, all of the poaching, etc. We have to build environmental stewardship. People have to know that I need to make the right decision and not the wrong one. They need to be incentivized by their education and what you've built in them, that they want to protect the environment by doing the right thing, not by being forced or enforced to do it.
I want you to speak to the need for us to be holding people accountable, because that's something that the Trust has been doing for some time as well, holding bad actors accountable, litterers, people who's spilling oil, that kind of thing. Why is that specifically an important part of what NGOs advocate for?
Absolutely. I mean, government role, we're not regulators, and, we don't try to fill that role. Some people think we try to. We don't. We do our job, which is advocacy for government agencies to be able to do their job.
Right.
The Department of Environmental Planning is an exceptional department, great legislation, but they're understaffed by probably 100 people. The Department of Marine Resources, protecting our marine resources, which is the most important asset that we have. It's the most under-resourced department in the public service when one considers their mandate. So, and I know Minister Clay Sweeting is very much intent on reversing that. I know Minister Miller is very much intent on building that. So enforcement is critical. If people do not feel that while we like environmental stewardship and voluntary compliance, we do need to have enforcement, because if we do not enforce little laws or getting turtles or getting crawfish out of season or undersized conch or destroying habitat, if there are no legal repercussions, then people are going to continue to do it. So we have good legislation, we have good advocacy, we need effective enforcement. People need to know that there are consequences for doing the wrong thing, and the only way they do that is if we have increased enforcement, prosecution, send some people to jail for doing garbage.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Gray, for your very insightful commentary. Next, up in a few minutes, we have a few young people coming to talk to me. But before we do that, Marcus and Brister, you are in the hallways. Tell us what's happening.
Hi, Ravana. As you can see, the hallway is bustling. Everybody is running, scrambling, trying to get to their different meetings. Everybody seems to be so excited about what's happening. I've already seen some of the script writers that are already running around just trying to get all of the meeting notes together. Of course, tomorrow and the end of the day, we're looking forward to those press conferences. And of course, the chair's note that's going to come from our Prime Minister, who is the chair of this meeting, and looking forward to see all of the outcomes that are getting ready to be presented. Of course, later on I'm going to be joined by some young people that are actually advocates within the region, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it is that they are also producing and the benefits that they have for this conference. Of course, we're speaking with stakeholders. We're looking at heads of government. I've seen Antigua and Barbuda. I've seen Suriname, as well as Trinidad and Tobago. And so these are high-level meetings, but they're also bringing youth activists, people that are working the grounds, and this is looking forward to being definitely a meeting that's never been done before. Of course, the regional front that we're getting ready to present is going to be astronomical. I'm definitely looking forward to all that is about to come out of this. And also, one of the things that we're also seeing here at this meeting is that they're looking at the climate, as we are addressing climate change. We're dealing with the 4 themes that are happening now. We're looking at mitigation to ensure that climate change, the effects of climate change are being mitigated, ensuring that we're not going through these processes every year, as well as adaptability. Of course, we know that we can't really undo what has already been done, but we want to ensure that we're not going to continue in the path that we've been doing. So we're looking to see, as you would have seen, we had some 2-3 years ago, we would have had the banning of one-time use plastics. Those small steps like that, especially when it comes to legislation, will definitely assist us with ensuring that we're adapting and we're mitigating. Of course, access to financing, as you would have heard earlier today from Deputy Director of Communications within the Office of the Prime Minister, Ms. Sandra Kemp. We're looking at access to financing. The UNFCCC is currently hosting a few meetings today. And of course, those are closed sessions, and so we aren't able to find out what exactly is happening just yet in those. years, but it will definitely be done at the end of the day. And lastly, the last thing that they are looking at is restoration. How do we come back after these climate change effects have happened? What do we do after these hurricanes have hit us? What do we do to ensure that these things aren't happening again? So restoration is a big facet of it. One of the things as well that I looked forward to from yesterday, and that showed, it was really a nostalgic moment for me, and I'm sure for everyone else that was watching, was seeing former Prime Minister Perry Christie come in and talk about how a lot of the work started from even when he was in office. And so we know that this is not just something that's happening and then will stop, or it isn't just something that's just beginning now, but we can see that there is continuity within our governments, within no matter what administration would be in. We're seeing continuity. We're seeing that people are taking climate change seriously. And so we know that we have to buckle up our shoes. We have to do what is necessary, whether it is protecting our mangroves or coral restoration, so that we can feel less of the impact from climate change, whether it's changing your energy supply, getting cleaner energy, using less fossil fuels. And as we would have had one of our speakers yesterday speak about us moving to cleaner gases and emissions. And so that is definitely one of the things that we're looking forward to. As well, we have carbon emissions and carbon credits, where we will also be able to get countries to pay us back out. And so we're looking forward to everything that's happening, and we're looking to see that we're able to keep that 1.5 number. We don't want it to get any worse, and we want to continue where we're at. And so I'm so happy for everything that's happening here. As things are progressing, I'll be sure to let you know. And so that's everything for me. Back to you, Rabina.
Thank you so much, Marcus. You're doing a great job out there. In studio with me now is Mr. Miles Johnson, who is a youth representative from the Office of the Prime Minister. Thank you so much for being here, Miles.
Happy to be here.
So give us an idea of, your role and why your attendance at a conference like this is so important.
Well, first of all, I believe that it's important to just get the youth's perspective on all of this. I mean, this is really and truly our future. And I don't want to be too brash, but this is kind of predecessor's mess, of course, but somebody's got to deal with it. And too long have I heard, especially from the youth as well, where it's been a thing where the youth feel like they should not be the ones to deal with it. But in my opinion, it's one of the things, like, it doesn't matter who deals with it, it just has to get done. Absolutely. Right? So it's important to get the youth, but not only the youth, but also everyone involved, right? And so that's why the youth being here is so important, is to just see every face at the table, every opinion, because even the youth, who I feel as though many people don't take them too seriously, but in truth, a lot of them do have good ideas, and that's why it's so important for them to be here.
And what are some of your takeaways from this session so far?
So far, the main takeaway I would say is collaboration. Like, this whole thing on the entire level is just collaboration. And it's so good to see, because for a long time now, I have been of this perception that there hasn't been any real collaboration amongst this region. But from this region and from this event so far, and from what I've learned, I am proven wrong by that statement. There's been a lot of collaboration, a lot of projects that have been going on. That's been helping us to not only share technology, but also advice on certain projects and stuff like that, such as blue markets, such as I've also heard about I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's a project in Jamaica, for example, artificial reefs. I believe it's called BioRock.
Right.
It's a very interesting project, essentially sending using steel and sending electricity through it, and then placing it in the ocean, so that coral polyps can actually start to grow on it. And it's proven to be an effective, essentially an artificial coral reef, but using actual reefs, and the steel does not erode. In fact, I believe there's one that's still been standing for 30 years that's passed through multiple of the severe hurricanes that have went through the Caribbean. So it's very interesting to see that collaboration here is like the main takeaway that I've seen, and I am very proud to see it, because truthfully, collaboration is the main thing we need in order to survive this.
Absolutely. I want to rope in your counterpart, Ashante Russell, who is also joining us in studio today. Ashante, can I get your thoughts? Similar question. What have been some of your takeaways so far from this event, and who are you most excited about seeing?
I'd say thus far, one of the major takeaways that I've taken from just being a part of this event has really been seeing how on a multilateral platform we are actually working together within this region. It has been consistently seen that we are really and truly the torchbearers of the climate change crisis. We feel the most, we're impacted the most, and in this way we must advocate the most. And in considering how the youth demographic usually trickles into this process, a lot of individuals usually think we're not as cognitive of what's going on. We are watching, we are waiting, we are truly hoping that there's advocacy being done, but we've accepted the platform that if we don't fight for the inheritance that we are going to be given, we're going to be fighting for the cultures that we will lose.
Wow.
So in this light, I'd say in working with youth demographics across the world with respects to this year and last year specifically, there is an outcry, there is an issue, and it far exceeds the Caribbean region. And in seeing how prominent and how painful it is, I'd say within these next 8 years in particular that are being organized and orchestrated, if we don't make a comprehensive stand, we really and truly will be in more of an issue than we are in now.
You talk about us losing the culture. How important is it? I know you and Miles are both here, but how do you guys reach out to your counterparts, to your youth counterparts? How do you get them involved? And how do you get them to see their role as important in the fight against climate change?
I'd say in more recent times, I've noticed that in terms of how to rope in the youth populace, not just within the region, but on a global spectrum, the aspects of education, enlightenment, and believe it or not, emotional intelligence are really three components that really need to be considered. And the reason I've been looking more towards emotional intelligence as opposed to the other two components, though we know education is important, and with respects to my personal development, it's always been something that I've been exposed to. Very young, I've been involved with and basically introduced to different agencies and school projects that have allowed me to not only be molded in a way that gears more towards environmentalism and conservation research, but the emotional aspect of it. The climate change crisis is, for lack of a better word, grim. And being a young person and being told that this is the world that you will grow up in, seeing that we are literally fighting for it, it actually takes the toll and takes the perspective if we are fighting for a globe that is really and truly in danger. Wow. And it's a long-standing battle. What exactly is it that we will actually have to inherit within the next 10 to 20 years?
So this next question is for both of you. You can take turns. I know that both of you are headed to COP-27. How excited is that? How excited are you about that? And what are your goals for when you get there? Miles, I guess you can go first.
Ooh, let me tell you, I am really excited for this event. This is honestly the first time I'm doing something like this. But just to be there and to see what goes on inside those rooms is really exciting for me. What I hope to be accomplished when we get there is to allow our voices to be properly heard, that our policies get across, and that the more developed nations of the world actually see our point of view, because like was stated yesterday, Europe is now in flames. They do not have the proper infrastructure to handle those things. I was hearing on the news earlier yesterday that apparently the Rhine River in Germany has started to dry up. It is a very serious thing. So I hope that when we come there in a more united front, that our policies and our voice really gets across more effectively.
I'm trying to take some question.
I'd say one of the major things I'm really looking forward to with going to the COP convention this year would really and truly be just being heard. And the reason I say that is because with reference to COP26, there was this consensus among the youth demographic. It was an outrage and it was an outcry. And really and truly, I feel as though that spilled out of the conference that was held in Milan a few months prior. We didn't feel heard. We advocated, we lobbied, and it wasn't that our presence wasn't acknowledged. it felt as though it was a continual process of acknowledgement. We know there's a problem. We're quite intimately familiar. We're trying to move the spectrum from a specific point of acknowledgement to proactive planning and thinking. We're more interested in hearing policies, solutions, and practices, and not just empty, baseless agreements and consensus among nations. What I'm looking forward to most, as opposed to what came out of these events and what is going to be done in the youth event being held next month, is really and truly a general understanding and more comprehensive commitment that in the next 8 years, our country will still be here. In the next 8 years, we won't be, as was mentioned yesterday, sinking, drowning, and ultimately burning up in the fight that we really and truly didn't majorly contribute to, but are fighting against.
That's amazing. Guys, this has been such an epic conversation with you guys. It's really, really interesting perspectives from both of you. Thank you so much for being here. For the next few minutes, we go to our roving correspondent, Marcos Ambrister, who has some updates from the floor. Marcos, what can you tell us?
Hi, Ravana. Everything is going smoothly so far out here. We've seen the addition of a few cabinet ministers here at today's conference, and so we're definitely looking forward to see what it is that they have to also contribute to this morning's sessions. Of course, all of our prime ministers and heads of states are currently within their working meetings with the UFCCC, and so we're just waiting to find out what many of those outcomes are going to be and what deliverables are going to be presented to us by our prime minister. Of course, we're looking forward to seeing the entire region rise up and definitely bring forth some level of change and accountability within the region. Of course, once again, those themes that they're working on: access to financing, mitigation, restoration, as well as adaptability to climate change. And so all of these facets that we're getting ready to go into, we're looking forward to all that they're going to present to us in the next few hours. Of course, there's also going to be a press release this evening, a press statement and a press conference this evening with the heads of government, and so we're looking forward to that. I see a lot of excitement in the air, especially with people like Prime Minister of the Republic of Barbados, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, and of course with our very own Prime Minister Philip Brave Davis. And so definitely this is shaping up to be the conference that's going to be for the books. And of course, one of the things that we're definitely benefiting from is having these people meet here in the Bahamas. Of course, we know there's economic benefits to it, but it also puts us on the scale, on the large scale. It puts us on the map as people that are progressing in climate change. These are definitely people that are showing that we're taking climate change seriously, not just within the region, but us as the Bahamas, as an island nation. We're showing that we are taking this thing seriously. Once again, we're in the top 3 most susceptible islands and countries and nations to climate change. And so we'll be seeing with the warming of the earth, we're seeing with the rising sea temperatures, all of these things are now directly affecting us. We're seeing even more major hurricanes. It's definitely becoming catastrophic, and we cannot begin to continue handling these types of things. I'm also joined now actually by one of our youth advocates that's currently within, and so we definitely can't wait to get to join him, to bring him on. We have Tej with us. Tej, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am excellent. Can you tell us, well, of course we know that this is a meeting with heads of states, but we're seeing a whole lot of youth development and youth involvement. But can you tell us, especially from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, can you tell me a little bit about what it means to have all of these nations coming together and discussing situations like this?
I think it's very important. Global warming is a world problem. It doesn't have borders. So it's very important us as developing nation pull together and form a game plan and try to combat it, because it affects us more than it would if you live in the United States, in a big country like that. So it's very important. I'm glad. It's an honor to see everybody. I think Mia Motley just told me hi. So it's great to see everybody coming there and getting together and trying to, like I say, form a game plan to deal with this problem head on.
Tell me, how hard is it actually? Because people see what's happening now, but can you tell us a little bit about how hard it is to actually get all of these heads of state together in a meeting like this, especially with the short period of time that we had to work with?
Well, all right, I work in the communications department, so our protocol division, they're the ones who really handle all the logistics. They make sure the leaders come in. They get them from the airport to the hotel. They make sure they're at the meetings they need to go to. They sit in on these meetings. They sit in with the prime minister, with the heads of state. They're fueled by young people, really young people who are really passionate about their jobs and passionate about this country and helping the world. They do a tremendous job interfacing with these leaders and like moving them around. So and it's a lot. They're pretty stressed. It's probably why you can't get any right now. They're busy in meetings and getting people where they need to go. But it's a heavy task. They've been at it for the last couple of weeks. I've been in meetings with them. They do a tremendous job, and I just want to salute to them.
And as you mentioned, a lot of the young people, we've seen that we're not just seeing high-level ministers or heads of state here, but we're also seeing a whole lot of young people. Can you tell us a little bit about their involvement with this conference?
Well, like I say, young people, they carry out all the execution. They do all the leg work. They do all the logistical work. Our ministry is powered by young people. I mean, we have Minister Fred Mitchell, who's an elder statesman in charge, but it's the young people that keep everything moving. They like I say, they do a tremendous job. I watch them day in and day out, and I'm in awe of them. And so they do a great job keeping everything moving. On our side, on the communication side, we're pretty young too. So what we do is we make sure that the Bahamian public knows the work that these amazing people do on behalf of the Bahamian people, on their behalf. So that's what we do.
Definitely, and we know that communications is one of the most vital departments within any ministry and organization. Can you give us just a little bit of the inside workings that happen on a day-to-day basis within any communications department?
Well, what we do, we issue directives. I guess we publicize directives sent from our minister, and then it's a lot of monitoring and a lot of not only what our embassies, what our offices are doing around the world, but just global events and trying to figure out what statement we're going to put out. But most of that stuff comes from the minister. But our main objective, our main directive is just understanding what our mission is abroad and what our mission is at home, and making sure that the Bahamian public is aware of it, and making sure, like I say, that we're working on their behalf. There's a lot of things I didn't even know happened in the ministry until I got there. So that's the main thing. I just want to break it down in as clear terms as possible, what we're doing, that we are working on behalf of the Bahamian people, that we are trying to do right by them, and we're doing the best that we can.
And that's the Deputy Director of Communications within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Today is definitely going to be an excellent day, and we cannot wait for everything that is to come for the rest of the evening. Back to you, Rabina.
Thank you so much, Marcos. So in studio with me now is Tyrone Clinton, who is the founder of FEM STEM. Tyrone, give me an idea. For people who don't know, who may not be aware, give us an idea what FEM STEM is and why is it so important that you are a part of this conference and that the work that you do with young women is so important.
All right, thank you so much for that question. So FEM STEM Bahamas is a youth-based nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower, equip, and educate high school girls in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. Mm-hmm. Why is it so important? Representation matters. It's great for not just myself, but young people in this space to understand that we fit in every capacity as it relates to climate change, the environment, and they all correlate. Science correlate, technology, engineering, and math all correlate with this very important topic.
So what have been your interactions with persons here, with other young people? What has that been like, really being able to talk to, collaborate with persons in this space?
Well, I actually participated and was in attendance of the youth climate change conference that happened at the University of the Bahamas. And it was great that we were able to hear the questions that the young people had for those in attendance, that they were able to make their concerns and voices heard, and that they are actually involved and interested as it relates to the environment and climate change.
And what were some of those concerns that you heard?
So some of the questions that were asked is, why is it not taught in our school system? How can we be better prepared? How can we become involved? And some questions related specifically to the coral reef issue that we currently face, and different solutions that they thought of to actually address this issue. So yeah, those were some of the comments and questions that were asked.
You talked about that feeling of pride to see young people involved. Can you speak to why even more work needs to be done to make sure that young people are not only aware but engaged?
Well, first of all, the environment is all around us. It's important that they are aware, because at the end of the day, we have to continue on having specialists in the field to be able to address these issues as it relates to climate change. They are impacted. So as you know, with Hurricane Dorian, a lot of young people were also impacted by that disaster. And it's important for them to know how they can help mitigate this issue. It's also, for me, important for continuous development and development of skills in the industry so that we can solve these problems as it relates to climate change in our country.
You talk about the need to always have experts in that field. So training, education, obviously very important. How does the work that you do, prepare young women specifically to become leaders in this space?
Well, like I said, it's science, technology, engineering, and math, and science is all encompassing it within itself. So we need people who are in environmental science and those particular areas, but particularly when I was involved in after the Hurricane Dorian event, we saw that there are people in technology, so they use drones to locate people. We had to have a lot of outside of support to be able to utilize a lot of things or skills that we would have been required. Disaster recovery is very important as well. So even though I'm in technology, we still were very heavily involved because the data or anything relative to technology, we had to be in place to be able to resolve those issues. So our organization prepares our young women for those careers to be able to help to facilitate those needs when a disaster strikes.
And what are some of the other careers that young women may have access to through a program like FEM STEM?
So we have, like I said, environmental science, we have engineering, we have 3D modeling and prototyping, we have programming. Specifically, we have a number of other topics that we try to incorporate, like soft skills like project management and curriculum development and writing, and all of that is important because even if you are a specialist in the field, you must be able, to articulate what it is that you are actually doing. So all of those skills we try to encompass as a part of our program. And so, like I said, those specialty areas like 3D modeling, printing, engineering, environmental science, we incorporate as a part of our program for this particular launch.
Okay, so can you give us an idea of what FEM STEM is currently working on? What are you guys doing? What sort of programs do young women have access to right now through FEM STEM?
Yeah, so we just finished last week a green energy workshop in Grand Bahama, and that was very, very impactful for the students and also even some of the adult learners, where they actually learned how to transform used cooking oil into biofuel, which is an alternative to fossil fuels. Through that, they were able to understand how it impacts the environment, and our after-school program expands on that, which is another program that we offer. It happens every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, where they learn to solve a problem as it relates to the environment in the Bahamas. So through that, they were able to, at first phase, they were able to develop a prototype, an app to address the waste management issues in the Bahamas for the New Providence Ecology Park, and we hope to expand on that for the fall.
The Green Energy Workshop on Grand Bahama, can you give us a little more detail about that? We talked about turning cooking oil into biodiesel. How do we then use a product like biodiesel to replace what we do with fossil fuels?
Well, interestingly enough, there's a place called Bahamas Sustainable Fuels, which is a part of Bahamas Waste, and they currently use biofuel mixed obviously with fossil fuels at that location in the garbage truck, that they actually use. So it can be used to, first of all, like I said, replace or reduce the usage of fossil fuels. And once we are actually continuously exposed to these opportunities, then hopefully the general public will be able to be aware of these options and to reduce our carbon footprint as well in the country.
And is biodiesel available for members of the public? If I said I want to use biodiesel to, I don't know, run my vehicle, maybe? Am I able to do that?
In generators as well.
Okay, so if hurricane season is approaching and I wanted to use biodiesel in my generator to keep my lights on, or I wanted to use it in my vehicle, how do I go about doing that?
Like I said, Bahamas Sustainable Fuels, they are available. They do have access to it. I think now the demand, if it's promoted even more, the demand will probably get higher. But for now, I know that is an option that is available for the general public. Unfortunately, I don't know of any other organizations or companies that produce it locally. I do know Cape Eleuthera actually run their operations off of that as well.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. And in terms of what we as Joe Public should be doing. You've talked a lot about finding alternatives. You've talked a lot about education. What should we be doing as Joe Public to aid and mitigate against the impact of climate change?
Well, it starts at our homes. I know as a part of our waste management course, we realized that a lot of waste, plastic waste, electronic waste, all of these wastes that we may not consider as problematic is problematic. So if there's ways we could think of to reuse them, reduce them, and recycle them, then obviously we could help to lessen the carbon footprint and the greenhouse gas emissions that actually comes from the landfill because of us. So we could start there. We can start by being aware of how we are contributing negatively to our environment. And unfortunately, we know the Bahamas is a small nation, population size. So there is only so much that we are contributing as to compare with our neighbors. But we still can make a difference by starting there.
You touched on electronic waste, and I want to go back to that because I don't think a lot of people think in terms of the electronic waste that they may produce. What does that look like? What is electronic waste?
Cell phones that you want to
the old bubbler.
The old bubbler, you don't want that no more. So you throw it in a garbage or throw it in, someplace where you may not think. But from my understanding, the New Providence Ecology Park has a component that deals with recycling those electronic parts, and that also your used tires. So you take your tire and you toss it aside. They also repurpose those as well. That would be also your car batteries. So, you kept it on the side of your garbage or somewhere, which actually have a lot of harmful agents in that. You can also take it there. So things that we, like I say, may discard.
So you're telling me that I'm not supposed to just throw my old bubble in the garbage?
You throw in the sink and
no, I'm not supposed to do that?
No.
Wow, okay, learn something new every day.
Yes.
If you could, what message, what would you tell Joe Public, people who are watching, people who are listening, people who are aware of the need to start doing something, but they're unsure where to begin? What would you say?
Start small. I would say start small. For me, I'm in technology, so it wasn't a factor to me until I see it and experience it. So start small. Like I said, you can segregate your plastic waste. You could take them. You could take it to the New Providence Ecology Park, have them discard of it properly. You could separate items that you may have taken for granted, meaning like your old trees or whatever like that. You could use it as mulch, repurpose it that way, and become more educated. And you could go to different resources. You could go to BAIC, you could go to Ministry of Agriculture to find out how you can do that. Just start small.
So there are options available in terms of recycling and repurposing things.
Yes.
Okay, so from the education perspective, how do we, because I know, like, for example, in the United States, they're taught from a very young age that this is the recycling, this is the trash, this is what goes to be recycled. So how do we get our kids sort of in that same mode? To know, okay, what should be recycled, what can be recycled, and maybe the avenues that are available to them?
Well, like I said, it start with education. So I would invite our environmentalists who are very good at what they do to also continuously involve and volunteer through our programs or even to the schools to inform them. Obviously, some policy level have to be involved.
Obviously.
So, implementing policies that requires us to separate our waste. Sometimes, you have to put the strong arm on people in order for it to get done.
True.
And obviously, I believe kids learn well by practicing and through projects. So make it a fun project. And I would encourage teachers and school principals to actually implement some either activity or program to involve and invite them to do that.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
Thank
Ms.
you, too.
Clinton. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
We're going back to our roving correspondent, Marcos Ambristo. Marcos, who do you have with you?
Thank you, Robin. That was definitely such an informational session. Now I am joined here this morning by none other than the press secretary from the Office of the Prime Minister, none other than Mr. Clint Watson himself. How are you, Mr. Watson?
Well, thank you. And how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing excellent. So good to have you. Always great to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about this conference, the makings of this conference? What exactly is going into it?
Well, sure, definitely. It's going to heighten the Bahamas' position globally as a world leader in the climate change fight. Prime Minister Davis has been adamant wherever he goes throughout the world that we have to give concerted effort and attention to the fight against climate change. The Bahamas is listed as one of the top countries in the world most vulnerable by the effects of climate change. And quite simply, what that means, let me break it down, is for us as a people, in a matter of years, if we don't take some action in the Bahamas, because of our susceptibility to climate change with our coastal lines, our sea level rising, our environments, the Bahamas could literally no longer be on the map. And that's a frightening scenario as a Bahamian, that your country could possibly be gone because of the devastation of climate change. We understood in the past that hurricanes were dangerous, but Hurricane Dorian brought a new definition to that. We see how it's not only dangerous, but it's deadly. And we have to fight, because these storms are getting more dangerous, they're getting stronger, they're becoming more ferocious, and it's nothing we can do about it. It's because of the depletion of what's happening into our environments. We don't contribute to the depletion of our environment in the Bahamas. We don't have all these emissions, but the world does, and it's impacting us. And so what we are trying to do is get financial reparation for what we are facing, so that we can put in place the necessity things that we need to be able to fight climate change. Furthermore, our debt is where it is, not because of any untoward thing that administrations have done, but because of the billions of dollars that happens through these storms that continue to make it difficult for our debt to continue to be intact, and it rises and it rises and rises. Add to that the fact that the Bahamas' per capita GDP, we're considered too high. We're considered the rich country because of some of the people that live here. And so we don't qualify for the funding that other Caribbean countries in our region qualify for. And so it makes it difficult to get funding. So what we're doing as a leader in climate change is bringing together the region and saying, let's discuss what are our issues, discuss what do we want for our issues, so that when we go to COP-27 in Egypt, we all speak with one voice. We are stronger as a bloc than we are as individual nations. And so what we're doing now is solidifying this bloc, bringing people together and saying, let's all talk about what we need to do, speak with one voice, so when the Caribbean speaks at COP27, the world listen. Not only listen, but they take action. So this is about developing a plan. What do we need to see done? What do we need? What funding do we need? How do we access it? So that we all have all of our ducks in a row, that when we go to the world, we know what we want, we know how we should be getting it, and we know how it can help and what it can do for our country. So that's what this conference really does. It's bringing together the players, the heads of governments, their technical staff, and talking about what do we all need to do as a region, and what is a message we need to be sending, so that we leave out of here this week with one voice, one message, and it brings us that much closer to getting access to the billions and trillions of dollars, I should say, in funding that countries have said they will put aside for climate change.
And that is so good, because you spoke about us bringing together the heads of government and us leaving with one unified voice. And just before we finish, I just want to know now, how do we engage our other partners, our allies, our neighbors to the north, those that can actually speak on behalf of us? What's the next steps?
Well, the good thing is we're now seeing these countries who've been pledging all along, and we're saying we're tired of pledges, we're tired of talk. We're now seeing some action. Australia did it, United States did it. They're now put in place legislation, which says that we are now going to be binded by law to take action. That's a good thing, because that means it's now in a law that you must do this, you must do that. So that's a good first step going into COP27. The next move will be obviously to explain the seriousness of acting now. Countries feel that they can say we make these pledges and not make good on it and everything will be fine. But you're now saying because of Dorian, the time is against us. We're now introducing a new element to this whole equation called time. And that is, we can't wait for another conference for you to say we're going to pledge. You have to act now, because we're in the hurricane season now. And before this season is over, Lord forbid, we could be facing another deadly storm. So time is a new element that we're introducing into this equation that says you must now act. And you must now begin to put action and not just make pledges. We don't have the time we had before. It's impacting us now. We're seeing the adverse effects of it now. Therefore, we need funding to fight it now.
And so there you have it from our press secretary out of the Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Clint Watson. Time is of the essence. We need urgency. We need things to happen now. And the first point that he made, we have to act as a unified voice and provide a unified front when we reach to COP27. That's it for us now. Back to you, Robina.
Thank you so much, Marcos. Time is indeed of the essence. In studio now with me is Mr. Conrad Hunt, who is the ambassador and deputy chair of AOSIS. Now, Mr. Hunt, tell us, for those of us who may not know, what is AOSIS, and give us an overview of your role.
Okay. Thanks for having me here. First of all, AOSIS is the Alliance of Small Island Developing States. It's a negotiating bloc within the climate space which negotiate on behalf of 39 countries. Of course, there are countries of the Caribbean, which is CARICOM, and then there's Asia Pacific, South China Sea, and also the Pacific Islands. So we are 39 in number to that group, actually.
Okay, so Mr. Hunt, we've heard a lot about how small island developing states remain vulnerable, the most vulnerable to the impact of climate change. How important, in your view, how important is a conference like this, the gathering of heads of government and organizations like yours, to plot a way forward?
Well, for us as small island developing state, the science is already there. The IPCC reports clearly states that we are the most vulnerable, small island developing states. But it's for our developed partners and the international community to act on this. And a conference like this is certainly important to re-emphasize, reinforce that we are indeed the most vulnerable, and there needs to be immediate action to address some of the challenges we face. As you've just heard, challenges such as frequent storm, issues related to funding, some of the challenges we face in trying to adapt to climate change. So a conference like this gives us a pathway to a unified voice, which will then perhaps build into the Alliance of Small Island States, which is a bigger group, and then perhaps build into a larger group of the G77 on China, which is over 130 countries. So that's a powerful voice, starting from a subset to the larger group, so we could take this forward to show concerns that small islands face.
I spoke to a few persons yesterday who commented on the need for climate justice. So that's becoming a sort of buzzword in this space. What are your thoughts on how we really go after climate justice for small island developing states?
Well, a number of countries have actually gone in that direction in relation to climate justice, but I never actually refer to it as justice. I look at it, there's an agreement under the Paris Agreement which speaks to our vulnerability, and it's the moral conscience of the developed countries that should be aired here, and they're the ones who have the responsibility. They're the major emitters are the ones that put us in this position. Right. So basically, while some may pursue a course of legal action, but the rules of the Paris Agreement certainly provides for them to do so. So it's not like we're making things up, but we're hoping that the moral conscience of the major emitters is certainly aired so that they can see that they have an obligation to look after the issues that affect small island developing states, and which major among them, of course, we have issue of loss and damage. Many of us are feeling that today. Of course, here in the Bahamas, I'm sure you've experienced this with Hurricane Dorian. I mean, what did you get after Hurricane Dorian? So issues such as loss and damage are some of the issues that we need to address in that space of climate, and also under the Paris Agreement, because certainly the science has proven that we are the most vulnerable, and this is an issue that needs to be dealt with.
Let's talk about loss and damage, because you referred to Hurricane Dorian, which cost maybe $4.3 billion worth of damage, and that was just two islands in the Bahamas, Abaco and Grand Bahama. So when we are looking in terms of funding and access to funding, why is that? I mean, obviously it's very important, but how do you navigate that? How do you negotiate from a place of strength, in your organization?
Well, the reality is, some countries like Bahamas and others who are high income countries tend not to qualify for most of these grants that are available in times of emergency. And that's why it is important that we have a special arrangement for issues related to loss and damage in terms of grant, concessional funding for small island developing states, one of the things we've always said is that when it comes to climate finance, it's totally different to humanitarian finance, which you get after a storm, or development finance. It should not be commingled. And a lot of times what we have is a commingling of these two types of assistance. Climate finance speaks purely to new and additional funding to address the challenges of climate change. And that's what we are seeking to get. Okay. Of course, we know after hurricane, we have the different UN agency will come in with the smallest amount, but that doesn't help. And we are looking for more concrete issues that we can have readily available right after an aftermath, loss and damage. Of course, you just lost a few homes, but it could have been worse. We have places in the Pacific where they're losing their ancestral right. Burying grounds are being totally washed away. I mean, your ancestry is being lost. And that is why we need some things like a loss and damage facility to address some of these challenges, because in some countries, even worse, are in worse position than us in the Caribbean. They may even lose their country. They're looking at space after sea level rise. Where do they go? So these are some of the economic factors and non-economic factors we have to take into consideration. That's why, as small island development states, we are calling for an agenda item to address loss and damage in that space at COP-27.
Absolutely. My final question for you is, what are you most hopeful to see come out of this conference?
This conference in the Bahamas. Well, I'm hoping that our leaders send a clear message that it's time for action. Action on addressing issue of loss and damage. Action on addressing things such as access to finance, of course, and of course, action by the major emitters to keep 1.5 alive. So I hope our leaders here today do that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hunt, for being here.
You're welcome.
We're going back to our roving correspondent, Marcos Ambrister, in the hallways. Tell us what's happening.
Thank you so much, Arabino. Well, as you would have seen, we have so many high-profile guests here in the Bahamas. We have prime ministers, heads of states. We have ministers from cabinets around the region. And, of course, we have some of the United Nations officials and different organizations. And so, of course, you know that this requires a heavy policing, of course, at this time. And so coming now to join me is none other than Assistant Commissioner of Police, Ken Stern. How are you doing today, sir?
Marcos, I'm very good, thanks. What about yourself?
I'm doing excellent. Always good when the police is with me and I'm not in trouble. Can you tell us?
Check to make sure that
clean record, I assure you.
Congratulations.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that's going into ensuring that this conference is police is, of course, armed. We want to ensure we have high-profile guests from across the region. We do not want to have an embarrassment. Can you tell us about the work that's being done that we can see, as well as those that are being done behind the scenes?
Marcos, first of all, let me offer gratitude to all of our partners in law enforcement. And being very specific, the police was not able to pull this event off by itself. So we collaborated with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Bahamas Department of Correction, and certainly the Airport Authority, Bahamas Customs, Bahamas Immigration, Ministry of Works. Notice how many agencies so far that has been involved and engaged for this particular event. So suffice it to say, our numbers are somewhere around 400 to 450 persons engaged. It's a 24-hour operation which began more than 72 hours prior to this event. It involves both physical resources as well as technical aids to pay attention to these types of securities. NAD, the Airport Authority, firstly had to be engaged as our visitors and delegates were arriving through that facility. And for those prime ministers, there was an offering of an honor guard. Thanks to the men and women of the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Force, an honor guard was present and received the prime ministers. In addition, one of the treats yesterday was Prime Minister Motley, when she came in and had an opportunity to inspect the honor guard. And that was a happy moment for many who were there. Saw a number of persons gathered. And then there's the testing by Ministry of Health. So this conference was such that everyone who was participating, yourself included, had to present a negative antigen test. And so that involved the engagement of the Public Hospital Authority, Ministry of Health, to carry out those testings. And so once those negatives came back, Bahamas Information Services had to kick in and present and prepare badges for everyone. Those badges, having been prepared, allowed for participants to be able to travel within this bubble. So here at Baha Mar, we, through the cooperation and the communications with the Office of the Prime Minister in Baha Mar, this area had to be checked and contained to support this level of a delegation that is currently on property. So you would, as you walk through, you would have noticed some of the restricted areas and some of the coming into and security checks that was involved. That is something that did not just start at 9 a.m. in the morning. So our officers were engaged in conducting various activities from 5 a.m. each morning, and that is with the arena, the accommodations, and to provide a 24-hour coverage on everything, including the vehicle that the individuals are being transported in. So once we are here, certainly there are various areas that persons who are not invited to be, we have to ensure that those are contained and security is maintained. And so I can say thank you to everyone concerned, yourself and others, because we spoke to the issue during our briefings. And so every agency, entity that is engaged, even your company, had to comply with what was put in place from a security component to make sure that at the end of the day, we are collectively able to present a product and a space that is both comfortable, enjoyable, and safe for these discussions to take place in. So thus far, the reports have been favorable on each occasion. Our Prime Minister seemed extremely excited. No adverse comments have been offered by our visiting guests, and so we are extremely grateful to this point. And it's not ended as yet, but we remain committed to the task.
And that's Assistant Commissioner of Police Ken Strawn. As you can see, this area, I want you to know, is very heavily armed and guarded. Every morning we've been having to actually come in and pass security check. This area is not being taken for granted. I can assure you we would have had to do our COVID testings, like ACP Strawn would have said. And of course, all of our delegates and our heads of states are ensuring protection for each and every one of them. Back to you, Ravina.
Thank you very much, Marcos. I am now in studio with the one person at this conference I think has at least the second most difficult name in the building. I'd like you to welcome to the studio Amalaye Oyake. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay,
Thank you. Good morning.
I feel a lot better now. Mr. Oyake, give us tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an introduction.
Well, I can share that my name is actually longer than...
Well, I imagine so.
Yes, so my full name is Amalayefa Oyakame Agbea. So I am...
See, told you, second most difficult name in the building.
Yeah, so my father is from Nigeria, and my mother is actually right from here, from Nassau, Bahamas. Actually, she was born on Nassau Street.
Wow.
And she was born on the corner of Nassau Street and where St. Agnes Cemetery is.
Yeah.
And so I was born in St. Croix in the United States Virgin Islands. So I'm actually from 3 places. I'm actually a Crucian, I'm also a Bahamian, and I'm also a Nigerian.
Good.
And I claim all 3 equally.
Which you should. Which you should. So give us an idea of what it is you do. You work for a company called Blue Origin. What does Blue Origin do?
That's correct. So Blue Origin is a space company. We are focused on human space flight, sending people to space, creating an environment where people can live in space, where millions of people can actually live in space.
Wow.
And I've been working at Blue Origin for a number of years. I'm a senior flight software engineer at Blue Origin, basically working on what's called embedded software, the software that goes in satellites and spacecraft. Prior to Blue, I was at NASA, the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab, and I worked on a wide array of missions. Actually, worked on pretty much all of the Mars rovers, except the most recent one, Perseverance. I worked on a number of Earth-observing satellites, which I will share about today. And I also worked on a number of International Space Station payloads. I think the number might be, I think it's 2, it might be 3, but I've lost count.
Okay, so Mr. Yake, give us an idea of how what you do relates to the fight against climate change and what we're discussing here today.
Well, I think the most important thing is education, and really educating the governments, leaders, and also the general populace about the dire situation that the world is facing. So having a bit of an inside view working on Earth science missions really allowed me to learn a lot about some of the challenges, some of the phenomena that is occurring. So for one, we're observing the warming of the oceans.
Right.
So that's happening. We're also seeing sea level rise. I was the ground data system lead for the Jason-3 mission. The Jason-3 mission was the follow-on for the Jason-2 mission, and prior to that, Jason-1, following a heritage starting from a mission called Topex Poseidon. So you had a 20-year series of missions that were measuring the sea level rise. And I had the opportunity working at NASA JPL to be able to be a part of the Jason-3 mission and see a lot of the things that were going on. And so one of the things that the science data shows us is that the ocean is rising at a rate of 3 millimeters every year.
Wow.
And
I want to stop you there. So 3 millimeters a year doesn't necessarily sound like a lot. It may not sound like a lot to the average person. Can you put that into perspective?
Yeah, so I can actually put that into context. If you bought a house in the Bahamas, in Nassau, let's say you bought a house in South Beach or Yamakra or some sort of, maybe some oceanside community, and you desired that, okay, I'm going to take out a 30-year mortgage on this house, and when I'm ready to retire, I'm going to will this house over to my children. So at the end of the term of the mortgage, 30 years, let's say 30 times 3 millimeters, that's about 6 inches, right? So you will have about 6 inches of sea level rise by the time you hand this home over to this oceanfront property to your children.
Right.
So if you think of that, rise in sea level, we can think of it in very simple terms. Oh, it's only 6 inches, but you have to think of it volumetrically. So you're thinking of the 6 inches times the entire expanse of the ocean.
Right.
And also, so you're calculating the volume. So with that, you have a tremendous amount of mass that presents itself in the event of a hurricane. So recently we've had, if you look at the poster outside, you see all of the various hurricanes that have occurred. And so if you think of the ocean swelling and the high tides and everything that's coming at you when you're living in your home and you're getting 150 miles an hour, sometimes up to 200 mile per hour winds, that's quite frightening, the ocean swell that you face. So it is quite alarming when you think of it in that context.
Right. In terms of what is happening here, the Caribbean is trying to present a sort of united front ahead of the COP-27 United Nations Climate Change Conference. Can you give me an idea of, or what advice do you have for countries in this region who are trying to present, their case to the COP-27 audience?
Right. So the advice I would give is already happening.
Okay.
That the Caribbean must have a united voice. So I have the benefit of perhaps being from multiple Caribbean nations. So I was born in St. Croix. My mother is from Nassau. My older brother was born in Jamaica. And so I'm very attuned to what hurricanes can do. I missed a year of college because of Hurricane Marilyn. It destroyed my parents' home and took off the roof.
Wow.
I lost contact with my parents for an extended period of time during Hurricane Irma. I had to fly into St. Croix with a generator because they had no power for 6 months. My cousin who lives here in Nassau had to mount a rescue mission to Abaco to rescue his daughter. And he was the first person to reach that part of Abaco in a United States Coast Guard helicopter. And so I think the thing that I would say is happening, and I'm very glad that there must be a united message, a united stance, a single position amongst all of the nations, if I may say that. This is my personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of my company or any of my previous employers, but from my personal experience, the level of destruction, loss of human life, and also the loss of livelihood presents a very dire situation for this subregion. So Caribbean unity is happening. And there is a forcing function, and that is climate change.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iraqi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here. We're going live to our roving correspondent, Marcos Ambrista, for more of the conference details from the floor. Marcos?
Good morning, Arabina. Thank you once again. I'm actually so happy to be out here. I'm getting to meet so many different people and catch up with a whole lot of friends that I have not seen in years. I'm joined now by Mr. Antonio Butler Jr., Foreign Service Officer within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as Planning Committee member for this conference. Mr. Butler, how are you?
I'm doing well.
That is awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what exactly has been going on behind the scenes? What has it taken to get to this point? We know what's happening now, but tell us about what you had to do to get here.
Well, it really was a team effort. I was a planning committee member from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We handled a lot of issues ranging from getting all the delegates in, making sure all of the diplomatic notes went out to inform the persons about the meeting, even down to helping with a lot of the organizing of the actual conference. So it has been a tremendous task, but I think we really did a good job thus far.
And I would have to agree with you, actually. Can you tell us a little bit about, especially being from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, what exactly the importance of a meeting of this magnitude, having delegates of this magnitude? Can you tell us about why this is so important, especially as championing it in the Bahamas?
Well, this directive is actually from the Prime Minister, and it's from the Office of the Prime Minister's portfolio. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs works directly with OPM, and the Prime Minister, this is one of the causes that he wanted to champion. Obviously, this couldn't be a spin-off because of the effects of hurricanes and the major effect of Hurricane Dorian. But even from COP-26 inside that happened last year, the Prime Minister has been making a lot of steps to bring more awareness to the effects of climate change. Moving into COP-27, which will be inside Egypt inside November, this meeting is actually a catalyst to bring all of the Caribbean states together to act as one voice, so we can go in there with an objective and know what we want to have accomplished. And so this is the main impetus for the meeting.
Definitely. So can you tell us a little bit about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, your involvement? I think a lot of times we see conferences of this magnitude and we don't realize that it takes multiple ministries and agencies to accomplish something like this. Tell us a little bit about what your involvement and the ministry's involvement is like.
Well, Foreign Affairs is like the glue. We bring all of the other agencies together. This was a mammoth task by the police. They have done a really good job. Security is tight. With Foreign Affairs, making sure that we have all of the bilateral rooms booked, making sure that we have making sure that everything is organized. You know, that's our main role. Protocols are in place, that the right people get to meet with the right people, and things can happen. And so that's what Foreign Affairs' role is. Even in the planning, we did a lot of stuff with the planning, even down to informing delegates, helping with the memorandum of arrangements, which would have been letting them know what is going to happen, what the schedule will be like inside the Bahamas. It was not an easy task. it was not an easy task.
I am sure of it. Thank you so much, Mr. Butler. We really do appreciate you taking time to come with us today. As you can hear, Bahamas, this is not an easy feat. This is definitely something that's taken us a while to get here. Even though it was done in a short period of time, lots of work has been put in, and I can't wait to see the outcomes and the deliverables that will be presented at the end of this conference. Thank you so much, and back to you, Ravina.
Thank you so much, Marcus. We're back again with Sandra Kemp, Deputy Director of Communications in the Office of the Prime Minister. Sandra, this has been a kind of a whirlwind day. There's been so much conversation. We've talked to so many amazing people. And I wanted to touch bases with you again on everything that's happening. Let's talk about the impact of, like, the dollar impact on the Bahamas that climate change has been having. In a post-Dorian era where we experienced some $4.3 billion in damage, the government has then had to borrow in order to fund restoration efforts. So when we're talking about the cost of climate change, can you speak to that a little bit?
And it predates even Dorian. This is something Joaquin, Irma, and so right now we have it that over half of the country's debt is directly related to climate damages.
And what does that really mean for, a country as young as us who's still, trying to find our way in the world, as it were, the progression, the growth of the country? What does that mean?
So what it means is that, of course, it's very expensive. So our regular economic activity cannot fund rebuilding. And so we have to then borrow on the international markets. And part of the terms and conditions for borrowing is that you have to repay. When you have to repay, that actually then now leaves us with less money for our social programs. It leaves less money for capital works, fixing our schools, our roads, our hospitals. It leaves less money. We know that more severe climate situations are coming our way, and we have less money to prepare for those things because we are doing all this debt repayment. So part of what is happening today is those discussions to find ways that help to protect the Caribbean and the Bahamas for when hurricanes do come and do cause catastrophic damage. How do we protect ourselves so that we have more money available to work on progressing as a nation?
One of the things that, also came out of our conversations today was the urgency that now seemed to be being experienced on the international on the international scene. You see Europe experiencing, intense fires. We see droughts, and these things are
melting.
Exactly. So we have all of these things happening now in these larger countries, whereas countries in the Caribbean have been experiencing the impact of climate change and seeing it worsen. And so we've been advocating for these things, but for the most part, seemingly being ignored. Now that this is becoming a more global issue, and we're seeing that play out on the world stage, do you think that is going to have an impact on the way the message from this conference is received at COP-27?
Definitely, and a part of the reason why we have been being ignored is because we've been all at it in our own little spheres. So Jamaica's speaking out, but on their own. Barbados on their own, Bahamas on their own. And that's the importance of this collaboration, of this meeting. This is the first time that we're going to COP as the Caribbean. Usually before we'd be Latin America and Caribbean together. But Latin America, they face different issues when it comes to climate in the Caribbean.
Absolutely.
So this is what is very important about our unified voice. And in bringing that unified voice, we are the place where everybody comes to party. And so we're really hoping that we have a lot of blue carbon. We have a lot to work with and to offer the world, and so that's the importance of this. And it's very exciting. It's the first one. We're really excited about it.
Are you particularly excited about anything else that's set to happen today? I mean, I try to tiptoe towards a little detailed information. That
so we are going to be having a press conference later. We are hoping that the Honorable Mia Motley will be able to participate in that.
Awesome.
For anybody who has not yet really followed her contribution to this climate space, I would highly recommend that you go and listen to her speeches. She's inspirational.
Yeah, she is.
And I think that she's able to assist in getting people to pay attention. Because again, you know, a lot of the Caribbean, we live with beautiful lives, and often we don't really pay attention to this. But when you listen to her, it really helps you to understand that
I think that's one of the core messages coming out of this conference as well. The need, you know, to preserve the way of life that we have become so accustomed to. A lot of people see this climate change conversation as sort of this high level thing that we don't really have to think about, but it's really impacting our day-to-day lives.
It is. And then when we talk about climate refugees, again, people are thinking about this as something that's far off in the future. But in 2021, I think it was 56 million people were actually worldwide were displaced.
Wow.
And more than half of those was climate related. So people are being displaced, but most people tend to think they see the news and there's areas with armed conflict and people have to leave their homes because of the wars. There are more people in 2021 that had to leave their homes because of climate related disasters than armed conflict. So this is something that is happening now. And that is why it matters now. And that's why the administration, we are just focused on making sure that this is addressed now, because it affects us now and it's going to affect our future.
That's definitely important to note. We're going to our roving correspondent, Marcos Ambrister. Marcos, who do you have with you?
Arabina, I am so excited to have none other than the Minister of Works, none other than Mr. Alfred Sayers. Minister Alfred Sayers, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be here.
That is awesome. We see one of the themes that is coming out of this conference is mitigation and restoration, of course, with responsibility for works. Can you tell me a little bit about what climate change has already, the impacts that climate change has already had on the Bahamas, and what type of policies now we have to come up with in order to be able to ensure that we are able to withstand all of the changes that comes with climate change?
Well, in 2019, in 3 days, the Bahamas lost 1/4 of its GDP. In other words, the IDB has documented that on September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in 2019, between the destruction that took place in Abaco and in Grand Bahama, in East Grand Bahama, valued $3.4 billion. That is the most dramatic. In addition, and what those figures do not tell, is that thousands of Bahamians were made into climate refugees, had lost their home. And let me just tell you something. In the Bahamas, like most of the Caribbean, one's home represents generations of savings. You know, because we start with a wooden house, we stucco it as our circumstances improve, and when it gets better, we build a stone house sometime around the stucco house. So when that is destroyed by a hurricane, it means generation of savings have been wiped out. And oftentimes, people in their senior years have to pick up worn-out tools to rebuild their lives. Therefore, if one were to analyze after the hurricane, even the survivors, you have a very high incidence of death. In addition, those who have survived, the psychic harm, the need for counseling, because as we saw in Abaco and in East Grand Bahama, parents, spouses, clinging on to their loved ones, 20 feet tidal wave, wash away, and you never see them again. How do we get closure? And we've seen the Parliament just 2 months ago having to pass a law changing the presumption of death from 7 years to 2 years so that there could be closure, so that one can access insurance coverage. So the impact of climate change for us is not theoretical. From the infrastructure perspective, We have lost schools, we have lost clinics. So much of the docks, airports, seawalls have been washed away or demolished. So we are engaged in the process of restoration. As we have shared in this forum, other Caribbean countries are similarly situated as us. The United Nations has declared that the Caribbean represent the most vulnerable countries globally as a result of global warming. So we have the same vulnerability. And what has become apparent is that notwithstanding all of the pledges that the industrialized countries which have caused this problem, whether you deny it or not, the science establishes that the industrialized countries are most responsible for the predicament that we find ourselves in. And notwithstanding all of the pledges that have been made, $100 billion, where is it? There's no transparency in terms of the pledge, the delivery, and the disbursement, and the challenges as being discussed now, the challenges of countries such as the Bahamas within our region, having to the difficulty of accessing climate financing. And also we see that as we seek to mitigate and also our measures of adaptation, we have to go into more and more debt. Notwithstanding the Hurricane Dorian, we are just, as we all are, coming out of a global pandemic. So we see that the debt burden that our countries face has compounded the problem. What is interesting, Prime Minister Davis disclosed that half of the national debt, which is roughly about $20 billion, is directly attributable to hurricane loss. So this is a very serious problem for the entire region. But separate and apart from acknowledging the problem is the strategy. How do we engage the global arena so that there could be what we call reparatory justice? If you cause my problem, you have to fix it.
The solutions. That is so good. Thank you so much, Minister Sayers. We really, really do appreciate it. And that's a wrap for us now. Back to you, Ravina.
Thank you very much, Marcos. Joining me in studio for the end of our broadcast is Mr. Latrey Raming, who is the Director of Communications in the Office of the Prime Minister. Latrey, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you for being here. So we have heard so much. There's been a very high pressure, high impact, lots of information coming out of this conference today. Coming toward the end of it, how are you feeling?
I think we're optimistic that we are striking the right tone ahead of COP-27. I think that there ought to be some consensus on the region and its position around financing. I think that there is still a challenge on the parameters and access to financing. Of course, the government of the Bahamas will push a major initiative around carbon credits to ensure the region itself enjoying the full participation of that. I think that this is by the government, this is a very aggressive push to ensure that the region in itself is well positioned to make a full argument in Egypt in the upcoming year. I think also this is in line with the Bahamas, who will be the chair of CARICOM in January. And so we're optimistic that this is going to be a major push and a major part of our narrative as a government.
Okay. In terms of the next steps, the Prime Minister is expected to make his closing address later this evening. What can we expect to hear from him?
I think what you'll hear from the Prime Minister is, one, that we are proud that as a region, this is our first historic meeting to have a regional heads meeting on climate change. So it's a big step. Two, he's going to argue for the UNFCCC to make this event a staple of their calendar year of events. ahead of COP27. 3, you hear him pressure larger countries to move with intent on access to financing. I think the major argument for most Caribbean countries is that climate change impacts significantly our debt to GDP ratio.
Absolutely.
Hurricane Dorian, like Minister Seth would have indicated, was $3.4 billion in 3 days. Wow. And so we simply cannot afford to borrow ourselves out of damages and financial impacts of events not caused by our country. And so I think that we need to, the issue of climate change is the issue of justice. We believe that it is the greatest injustice towards small island developing states. I think, but we also hope that we could sensitize Bahamians to the urgency of the problem. And it's difficult because you are sensitizing Bahamians to a challenge when they are confronted with domestic issues that are present, even though climate change are predicted to be, the impact is years away.
Okay, I think that is a good place for us to end. Thank you very much, Lachey. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for being here with us for the past several hours for Climate Conversations. Be sure to stay tuned to the OPM social media pages and to continue to follow us as we continue to provide coverage over the next few hours and speak with some of the movers and shakers. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. We have a short video recap of the day's events. Thank you for watching. Till next time, I'm Arabina Pia. Have a great day.